Arun, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Yeah.
After, I don't know how many reschedules?
A handful.
But you know what? Like we were talking about earlier, I'm glad that those cancellations, or they were not cancellations. They were reschedules.
Yeah.
Were for a good cause.
No, completely. I truly mean it. You brought me a lot of good luck.
Yeah, I didn't know that you were doing voice acting.
Yeah. So well, actually, kind of since the pandemic. Before the pandemic, I was wanting to get into it. I take a lot of class and all that stuff, and like I had a teacher years ago be like, "Oh, your voice is great for voiceover," and I was like, At the time, I was working actually in K-Town at this like restaurant, but I was also doing the nightclub stuff, and so my voice would be really blown out for like class on Monday, and I was like, I think it's just because my voice is blown out, and you like it,
and it's like unique, yeah.
Yeah, and then he was, but anyway, then a couple years later, I was reached out to another voiceover teacher and was like, hey, can I do some private lessons with you? And she's like, yeah, you have a great voice for it, and she set me up, and then actually Noah, my partner, helped me get into doing some free voiceover for some games and stuff like that. And then that just helped me sort of build my experience. And then I've been like, doing some gigs, which has been amazing. It's so fun.
And so when did you always want to do voiceover stuff, or is it one of those things where somebody brought up to you like, oh, you have like a cool voice for that, and you're like, oh,
yeah,
maybe I should give it a try, or was it like, stop being weird, like, it's just my voice, like what?
Yeah, everyone hates to hear their voice anyway, so it's like, no, I definitely was like, I sort of was like, oh, that would be cool, but I'm already like acting, I'm already like have my day job, and from what I understood, like getting into voiceover is like just as hard, if not harder, than to start your acting career, because it's like even a smaller community in LA and stuff, and so I was like, oh, I mean, that's nice. A couple of people, I guess my whole life people have been like, wow, your voice is really cool. But like, I'm like, okay. And then sort of the opportunity presented itself to just sort of like put myself on tape. Now, it's so easy to record stuff. It's so easy to just like get copy off the internet, rewrite it, and I have a better understanding of that. And so then, and so that's sort of how I got into it. Yeah.
And so when somebody tells you, oh, you have such a good voice for voice acting, do you know like what that is exactly? Yeah, what does that mean?
It's interesting. I really didn't. I actually had to ask one of my teachers, and she was like, oh, it's like the timbre of your voice. Actually, I may be pronouncing that wrong.
Yeah.
Timbre of your voice. And
what does that mean?
I guess it's just like the quality, like, I guess like the quality of your voice.
Okay.
And I guess like I have a little bit of I have a low-ish voice, and then I also have like a smidge of graveliness.
Yeah.
But it's funny too, because one of my friends, girlfriends, was doing a lot of voiceover, and she was like, and I got to meet her, and her voice is like super gravelly, and I don't remember the word she had for it, but she was like, yeah, this quality voice is like really in right now, so she was getting a lot of like
so there's even
work.
trends
Trends, yes.
Because see, whenever I would think voice actor or voice actress, or just doing voiceovers, I automatically think of the old school radio, like and welcome to KFI, just like weird stuff like that.
Totally.
But do you? Just because I have a couple of other friends that are doing voiceover work as well, and its stuff is super unique. Do you think that it has to do with getting away from more of that stuff that I was describing into more real?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Definitely.
Like they want real people sounding like different from other people.
Yeah. It is funny because I'm really like a noob at voiceover, so don't take anything I say super seriously. But I think you're totally right that like there's this whole push commercially, even in like, visual commercials, for like real people, real sounding, And so that's the same thing. Like you're not going to hear like a promo that sounds like a promo. They want you to just sound like you're talking to your friend. They're like, oh my God, I love this drink. You should go out and have it.
Yeah.
And then, so there's definitely like, I think a trend towards that. And then it's funny because you sort of want the thing that stands out, but then that thing becomes like the new norm.
Yeah.
And so everyone wants like a voice that sounds like the original, which I guess is sort of like any, good, right? It's like, oh, whatever fancy name brand is doing this, now every other brand's going to try to
do something similar to that.
Yeah. So it's sort of like the same in voiceover. But also I think that, it's very much like casting too. Like you have to figure out like where your voice fits,
Okay.
which I don't really understand totally yet, but it's like, you know, does it fit in for this type of commercial? Like maybe my voice couldn't sell like luxury cars, but it could sell like,
Coke or
yeah,
something.
exactly. Yeah. And so, yeah, so definitely it's like where it fits and then like learning how to do the thing that your voice fits to.
And I mean, just from what you described, you know how you're saying like, oh, it's so hard. It seemed like it was a pretty easy road for you. Because your story is just like that classic story is like, hey kid, I think you got something there. And then you just take some classes and then you started working.
That's actually true. I always think that I'm like not that person, you know, but that's true.
That is living the Los Angeles dream.
Yeah.
I'm just picturing a disgruntled voiceover would-be actress. It's like,
exactly. Like, I hate that person.
It's been 17 years, man. I can't get a gig.
Yeah, I know. I sound like an asshole. But
that's life in LA, baby.
It is, I know.
You either make it or you don't.
I know. But, you know, I'll be totally honest. I'm not like paying all my bills with it. But I love it because, you know, it's so fun. Like, there's a freedom with voice acting. So I was in this one thing, like narrative podcast, Solve, and I got to play an Amish lady.
Oh, really?
And it was like on camera. I would never be cast as an Amish lady, but I was like, I sound like an Amish lady.
Yeah.
Like, this is great, you know. And like, I was adopted, and I grew up in America, and like, I never learned like my native language, Nepali. I mean, I've studied
really?
it. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But like, my accent is completely American, and I don't like have a great accent in Nepali or anything. And so because my voice is so like typical American and it's like West Coast, like I have a little bit of Valley Girl, you know, it's my visual casting is much different sometimes than my voice. So like, I feel like voiceover is so freeing. And like, I did this one thing where I was like a warrior, and like, I'm not necessarily going to go in for warrior, but like voiceover, I can do it. You know, it's really fun. That's what I love about it.
And so do you still want to pursue acting? Do you want to pursue both? Do you know, is there one that you prefer?
Yeah, you know, I still love acting. It's like my first love, and I would love to, you know, be like working consistently as an actor too. But it seems like voiceover in some ways, it does feel like it's more accessible.
Especially during the pandemic, right? I'm sure it was a lot easier to do auditions for voiceover than acting, right?
Yeah. And it was, and, you know, and I think everything too with the pandemic, with acting and with voiceover, it's like, you know, those things where it's like, yeah, it's pretty cheap to go like on Amazon and buy like a microphone that's pretty good. It's pretty cheap to go on and buy like a screen or a stand for your camera or phone even to record auditions. But like, because of the pandemic, we all just did it. And now we all have it. And like, it's very like, and you know, you used to have to go in a studio to do voiceover, and like you can still do that, and that's where I filmed like one of the things I did, but I can also just do it from home now. And then we do a live Zoom, and they're like, yeah, we like that take, cool, we're done, you know.
I mean, just it's crazy the world that we live in, where for $100 you can get a pretty decent USB mic that you just connect to your laptop. You get a $60 4K or whatever 1080 HD webcam, and like you got it, you know. And that's pretty much all you need. Upload stuff to Google Drive, people listen to it, and they're like, okay, great, sounds good. They, you know, it's just so quick now.
It really is. And like, I'm really not technical either, and so like, you know, I have to ask Noah how to do stuff, and you know, like after a couple times I start to get a hang of it, and it's like really easy. It's like, if I can do it, like anyone can do it. So just like, you know, like click and drag it, and then like, okay. So
so what, when did you start wanting to, or when did you get the feeling of wanting to become an actor?
Oh my God. Like ever since I was little, like since I was like 5.
Now, how did that happen? Was it one of those things that you were the kid that was always like, hey, look at me. Come on, look what I'm doing.
You know, it's so funny. I was like a really shy kid. I think my mom like was surprised when she saw me on stage, and I was like, it's my time. She was like, I didn't know you have that in you.
So was it like in the like school plays, like elementary school and stuff like that?
Yeah, like I think think I remember.
Do you remember the first thing that you played?
I think I do. I can't tell if it's like a memory I sort of created for myself or if I actually remember it. But I'm pretty sure I was in kindergarten and we were doing a play for, we were doing Peter Pan.
Okay.
And we literally drew lots for like, who wants to be this part? Okay, like we'll draw it out. And then we set up the whole boat with like these fuzzy blocks. And there was like, Wendy had to like jump off the gangplank and like, anyway, all of that. I like remember that. And that
so you played
amazing.
Wendy?
I was Wendy, yeah. I think, or maybe I was Nana. See, I don't even know.
Were there already like sassy theater kids like, what does Arun get to be Wendy? Ugh.
I don't think so ever. I was like, I never got the like lead roles and stuff too. Like I went to, I was very lucky to go to middle school, and actually an elementary school, middle school, and a high school that all had great art programs and performance programs, music and singing and theater. But I was never the one who like got the lead roles or anything.
Did you want those?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I mean, that's going to be what creates a fire.
Yeah, it's true.
And that's when I'm gonna see you with some scotch, a cigar, and your leather freaking chair, and be like, I got the lead, baby. That's right. I own the world.
Totally. Yeah, it just took 40 years, and it's gonna be.
Hey. There's so many actors out there that start like in their late 30s, and it's crazy.
It's true, yeah.
So at that moment, like the little school plays, that's when you knew like, I wish I could do this all the time, or?
That's a good question. I think maybe in elementary school, I just really loved it. And we did, plays every year. And then like, I remember in 5th grade, we did Alice in Wonderland. And of course, we had like 5 casts for it. So it was like Alice 1, Alice 2, Alice 3. But I was Alice 1, and that was really fun. And actually the person who played my older sister in that is still a friend of mine. And she like was in an off-Broadway play. And so she's still acting. Also 5th grade. I think I think that this also had a big impact. In 5th grade, with Nan Loveland, we did King Lear.
Okay.
We did like a mini version of King Lear, and then we all got to go as our 5th grade trip to the Oregon Shakespeare Festival in Ashland.
Doing King Lear in 5th grade?
Yeah, I know. I just remember like we did,
that must have been exciting.
It was. Well, and she, I think she was like totally a genius. I actually found her on Facebook, and I like gushed to her, and I was like, I love you, and I love Shakespeare, and thank you for like setting me up for life. Anyway, she was like, that's nice. No.
You're like, who?
Yeah, exactly. Who are you? But
you know what? I thought about stalking my old teachers.
I think you should.
But I was like, I think if I go to my old elementary, I wonder if they can give me like the old yearbooks. I'm like, I forgot their first names and things like that.
Right.
That's interesting about teachers when you mention like, thank you for setting me up for life.
Yeah.
Where I feel teachers are probably one of the only professions that like they will stick with you forever, even if they're good or if they're bad. Like,
I think you're totally right.
But like the good teachers that I've had, I'm like, oh my gosh, I am so happy and so fortunate to have had that person that like, because of them, I'm into history now as much as I am and things like that.
Oh, completely. I know. And I think that teaching is such a thankless job. And it's like you sort of, and I think when I was a student, I was just so oblivious. And I sort of like thought the world was made in my name. And I was like, like whatever. And then you sort of reflect on it like 2 years, 10 years, 20 years later. And you're like, that person like, yeah, exactly. Sparked that passion for that thing or believed in me and like, allowed me to do this or put my name in for this other thing that ended up like changing my life. And
I think 2020 probably brought a little different perspective on people, on their views on teachers and what they have to go through, right?
That
Parents,
too.
Imagine, they have 2 kids and now they have to do the Zoom thing and make sure their webcam is on and this. And then, all right, after they're done from school, it's like, what are we doing? What are we doing? Can I do this? Can I do this? Like, oh my gosh.
I know.
Please take them. Do whatever it is that you were doing. How much money do you need? Got it.
I know. I cannot imagine. And I have a lot of friends who have like 2 kids that are 5 and under during the pandemic. And it's like, why? Like, that must be so hard.
Yeah. I mean, because it's a lot. I mean, it's a lot just you doing your job. In general, it's a lot and takes a lot of time from you. And then you have humans that you have to take care of, and you have to be more involved in the teaching process and follow up on them, and it's a lot.
Yeah,
it's a lot.
And it's also like, I don't know how to teach someone how to read. Like, how are you supposed to teach your 5-year-old how to read? Like, just here's a book.
Here's like read, and it's like, why can't you read?
Yeah.
Why don't you know this word? It's really easy.
Yeah,
Look.
it's just cat.
Yeah, cat.
You're stupid. Yeah.
Close the book. Go. Here's the iPad. Go play.
Yeah, exactly.
Go watch Netflix. You know, it's funny because when I started with music, so so in my family, we have a lot of family members that either, you know, they play guitar, or they play piano. It's music is in my family. My mom used to sing professionally in Mexico.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, she used to be like in one of those variety shows, like in the 60s and stuff.
What? That's crazy.
So music was always around me. But I never really, I was never like at 4 years old, like, oh my God, I want to play the guitar. Nothing like that, right? And it wasn't until I think elementary school, how you have like choir.
Yeah.
Where, you know, the school's like, oh, you know, we're going to do this school thing and we're going to sing ensemble of these songs. And, you know, it's kind of like a play, musical type stuff.
Oh, completely. Yeah, yeah.
And after one of the rehearsals, the music teacher's like, Carlos, can I hear you sing? I was like, why? It's like, oh, just like, I don't know. I think you sound really good. You know, maybe you can have like more of a lead. I was like, oh.
I'm not about that.
Yeah. I'm like, come on, let me hear you sing. I'm like, like, no, Carlos, you need to, okay, we're going to put you just up in front then. I'm like, okay, that sounds okay. But what was really cool about her is that, that was kind of like my first exposure, because after that, they're like, okay, you know, you're going to join like ensemble choir, and you're going to get the opportunity to go to other schools and sing like, you know, the songs that we sing over here. And then we're going to do field trips. And they had me like, field trips?
Yeah.
I like not being in school and going out on a bus and doing stuff. And she took us to an opera.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And I was like, and we had to dress up, you know, and just like a little, you know, white shirt and a little tie, little clip-on tie. You know, somewhere like in downtown Los Angeles. I don't even know where I was at, and I don't even remember what opera it was. But just like being in, you know, that velvet carpet, the architecture of was it Pantages? No, I don't think it was Pantages. I don't know. But it just like looked crazy to me. Like, wow, this looks nice.
Yeah.
And, you know, them taking your ticket, just the whole experience of going to one of those places, it just kind of had me in awe. And then we watched the opera, and it was just like, it blew me away. I was like, whoa, this is amazing.
That's so cool.
So it got me more interested. And so now when we would do choir, I'm like, oh, this is like kind of a cool thing. Like people do this kind of stuff. And then it just kind of went away. And it wasn't until I want to say in junior high. So I had moved schools into this new school, and I didn't really have friends, right? So the teacher was like, hey, this is a new kid, Carlos. You two popular kids, take him with you, you know, go play with him, you know. Like, okay, you know. So he's like, hey, so what's up, man? Like, so where, you know? And I was like one of like 5 Mexican kids in that school.
Wow.
You know, but they had kind of like a similar thing, a program where, you know, the 5th grade class would sing, and then, you know, they'd perform and things like that. And then they had the thing called ensemble. Ensemble was for like, you know, the top tier.
Yeah.
And they had, at the beginning of the year, they always had tryouts for it.
Oh my God, that's intense for like 10-year-olds.
And so, but they kind of kept it pretty casual, I guess. But now that I think about it, it's actually even more frightening because there's one thing like the American Idol style, which is like 4 judges, right?
Yeah.
Let me tell you what they did. So we'd have the ensemble class, the whole 5th grade class, right? All right, everybody, great job. And now we're going to do ensemble tryouts. So anybody that wants to try out for ensemble, okay, you know, put in line. And so it's you singing to your whole 5th grade class.
Oh my, I know.
That's ridiculous.
That's really scary.
And so, but you know, I'm sitting with the cool kids. And so they're like, hey, let's go try out. Like, really? Like, yeah, like, fuck it. You know, just like to be, yeah, and like, we're just going to fuck around, you know? You're in, right, Carlos? I'm like, yeah, I guess I'm in, you know? I don't want to be a nerd or anything. And so we're in line, like, okay, cool. Like, what are you going to do? I don't know. I'm going to do like fart noises or something. And I'm like, my stomach's starting to turn. Like, I don't want to do this. Because I definitely don't want to do what they're doing, which is just like stupid shit, right?
Yeah.
And just like out of a Disney movie, so we're next in line, right? So it's popular kid 1, popular kid 2, and then me, right? And so that person's singing, and then they're done like, all right, so who's next? My buddy grabs me like, no, you go. We'll go after you. So they push me to the mic like, oh.
No.
Like, hello, my name's Carlos. All right, so we're going to sing, you know, dun, 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 dun. And I sing like the voice of an angel. And they're like, oh, wow. You sing good. Okay, great. All right, next. My friend ran away. Motherfuckers.
They didn't want to follow that. How could they follow that?
No, it's just... I think it was a setup the whole time.
Yeah.
You know, new kid, you know.
I think you're right.
Might have been a setup.
I think that was pretty
But
shitty.
a setup that changed my life.
Well, hey.
Yeah, so anyway, so after that, you know, we all sit down like, all right, you know, we're going to post, you know, whoever gets to the next step on Ensemble tomorrow. And so the next day, you know, and just showing up to school, I had forgotten about it. And then somebody was like, congrats, man. Congrats. I was like, oh, what? It's like, oh, you made it on Ensemble. I was like, what? That was not like a good thing. Oh. I was just like, no, this is a joke. Oh. I just did it because they were in freaking line. And so I go tell the music teacher that. I'm like, oh, no, this is all a joke. Like they, you know, we were just going to play a trick and like, da-da-da. And they're like, well, you made it, so now you got to do it. I was like, no. And they dangle the carrot again. But, you know, you get to travel. You know, we get to go to this place and we get to go to SeaWorld. I'm like...
SeaWorld? Here I come.
Here I come, baby. But yeah, I think that's when I started kind of like getting the confidence of, oh, okay, so maybe I can sing.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it is. It's interesting, right? To like have to have, I mean, you know, have other people believe in you to show you your own like talent too. That's interesting.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you were you born in the U.S.?
No, so I was born in Nepal, actually.
You are born in Nepal. Okay.
Yeah, and then I was adopted when I was a baby, so I was only 7 weeks old. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you don't remember anything of it, obviously.
No. But I travel back a lot because of my nonprofit work. But
Yes.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that? Because
sure.
So that's how I kind of like really started following you.
Oh, okay.
Because I started seeing like the stuff that you would post, right? In a world of everything is terrible in the world, you post things that, you know, bring smiles to people. Aww. You know? And so I started seeing stuff about the Kumari Project. So what is it exactly?
Yeah. So basically, thank you, by the way. So basically, the Kumari Project, our mission is to empower orphans, especially girls who were not adopted from Nepal, like I was. So basically, there's like a long history of kids being brought to orphanages in Nepal, or what they call children's homes, and they're really never adopted. They sort of just grow up in these group homes, and sometimes they are adopted, and there's like this whole history of paper orphans. So they're actually like,
what's that?
They're children who have actual like parents or relatives, but they're sort of put in these homes to sort of get educated and then maybe come back to their families when they're done being educated. But what would happen is sometimes these kids would be sort of sold into adoption, like unknowingly the parent.
The parents are like, I can't take care of them.
Yeah, exactly. And then the kids would sort of go to these orphanages or children's homes, and then be sold by the people who ran those homes into like families that were abroad or something like that. And so they're called paper orphans because they're not truly orphans, but like they were orphaned or abandoned. And so basically like, a long time ago, I went to Nepal, and I was in college and was trying to sort of do some volunteer work in the orphanage system that I was adopted from. And
how did you find out about that?
So like my mom, sorry, it's like kind of a long story, but okay.
Yeah.
So basically my mom fell in love with Nepal before I was even before she even wanted to adopt me.
Sure.
And then because of that, when she adopted me, she realized that like she was taking me away from like a culture that that I would have otherwise had access to.
Yeah.
So she sort of did her best to try to bring me back to Nepal as much as I could growing up.
Yeah.
So like I would go every 3 years starting when I was 5. So
really?
Yes, it was pretty cool.
Uh-huh.
And like then
that is so good. Like foresight on her part.
Yeah.
Right?
Completely, and I have to say I'm so grateful for her like recognizing that, because I think there's a lot of kids. I'm learning more and more sort of about transnational adoption. I've always been really interested in it and bringing adoption narratives to film and entertainment and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I also realized that I have like a really good situation, and like it hasn't been like without any challenges, but I think that I've come to like a really good place with my adoption and feeling like hybrid culture like works for me.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people who are raised in transnational adoption families that don't have any access to like their birth culture.
Right.
And it's really hard.
Like this is your new culture now.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So exactly. My mom had a lot of foresight, and so I grew up, and then it was really neat. Like I remember in high school sort of having this moment of like, I feel, like I miss Nepal. Like Nepal is a home to me. And that was like a cool,
because at this point by high school, it's pretty regular that you go over there, right? Okay.
Yeah. Like I'd been like, now I've been over like, I've lost count how many times I've gone, but it's been like over 30.
Okay.
So anyway, and then in college I started doing volunteer trips. Oh, anyway, so your question was about the orphanage. So basically my mom had adopted me from this one specific orphanage that is still there. And so we would go back sometimes growing up and like drop toys off and stuff like that for the kids. But we sort of got wind that you weren't supposed to give like financial donations because the money wouldn't ever get to, And then even toys sometimes would get sort of taken by the staff first, and then maybe if there's anything left over, given to the kids. So there's like a lot of corruption going on. And I wanted to do some volunteer work and try to like at least provide some service, if not actual things that would maybe get stolen.
Is the volunteer work like recent, or did you start doing that when you were younger?
That was that was like in college, so that was like years ago. And then I realized that was sort of voluntourism, which is now kind of being looked down.
What does that mean?
It's sort of like, it's like, let's, instead of taking like a family vacation to Hawaii, we're going to do like a week in Guatemala, like painting a wall at an orphanage or something like that. And it's like, oh, really? That's not necessarily like being of service in a way that a community might need. Like one, it's very short term. So like you're not making a long-term impact. Two, like if you're painting a wall, that means they're taking money from like local, like people they could be hiring to paint that wall.
Okay.
And with orphanages in Nepal, there's like a whole lot of research about, volunteers that go to like the nurseries, and they'll like spend a week like picking up the babies and like trying to give them, exercise and care and attention. And then what'll happen is the week after that person leaves, the babies have gotten used to being like picked up and cared for, so they will cry more, which then means that the people who are the like 24/7 caretakers are less likely to take care of them because they're being nuisances.
Right.
And so it's like all of these sort of like effects of like voluntourism that are unseen and are actually sort of negative effects for like the people in the community you're supposedly serving. So I was sort of realizing that like I didn't want to be a part of that. I wanted to create like a sustainable solution for the orphans that were like in this orphanage system. And then after a lot of sort of rigmarole and trying to work with the orphanage system to, hire new staff or get new vendors that would give like better quality food and, get all this stuff, we realized that just the staff and the administration is extremely corrupt.
Right.
And so we needed to start our own safe house, we call it, which is like, basically it's a home for 12 kids, 10 girls and 2 little brothers.
Yeah.
And it's right outside, like on the edge of the Kathmandu Valley. And so we basically rescued these 12 kids from the orphanage system that I was adopted from.
Oh, really?
And yeah, and we had to like find this local partner who was like sort of brave enough to go up against this like mafia-esque, you know.
Yeah, because when there's corruption and there's money involved, right? It's going to be hard to, you know, because now it's like, hey, you're taking money from our mouths at this point. Right?
Exactly. And it's like, I mean, I guess in a way it's kind of like public schools, right? Like sometimes you get money based on how many kids are there. And like, that's what the same with the orphanages and the children's homes, like they get money based on how many kids are there. So if you're trying to take kids out, even if you're trying to give them something better, it's money out of their pocket. You're totally right. And it's really scary. It's like such a corrupt thing. You know, everyone sort of thinks of, not everyone, but I think that the idea of adoption is like you're taking this kid that wouldn't otherwise have a home, and it's really beautiful, and like these orphanages are caring for kids that like don't have families, and it's really you know a great work and stuff, and like it can be very ugly and sad and dark.
How do you ensure, because you know you're not living there, right? So how are you keeping tabs that everything's being on the up and up, you know?
Yeah. Well, so with us, so now that we sort of we have this great local partner, Prisoners Assistance Nepal, and we have our own special home established, and we manage it completely. So we hire the staff, we oversee the staff, we handle all of the activities and fees and everything for the kids. And, you know, it's still been a journey, getting the right staff, getting staff that we can trust, you know, getting staff that, because we can't be there every day to oversee them. You know, it's really important that we have like
trust,
exactly. And so I mean, it's been we go back every year, well, except for the pandemic. We go back every year, twice a year for about a month at a time.
Okay.
And that's usually when we just like check in with all of our vendors. You know, our kids go to some of our kids go to like an art therapy sort of child trauma counselor, and so you know we'll check in with them and see if there's any kids that need to cycle in. You know, sometimes the kids will be like, oh, like a netball team started at our school, you really want to do it, but we need sneakers, you know, so we make sure that like they've got all the supplies to do the netball tournaments and stuff like that. And our staff is getting better and better at being proactive with those things too, so we don't have to be on the ground for all of that. But you know, it's taken like a few years. I think we've had our home for 6.5 years now. And our first kid left the home because she graduated high school, and she's now doing her like +2 college, which is really 11th and 12th grade.
Sure.
And so it's been like managing that because she's our first one. So it's like new information for us too, figuring out how to get her set up. What is I guess, what is life in an orphanage like? Like, Carlos the orphan wakes up. Yeah.
Okay, wakes up and not ours, just the regular one.
Yeah.
Or the old one.
That's a great question. Okay, so basically,
like what does a day look like?
Yeah. So you would wake up. You would.
And at what time?
Oh gosh, let's see. Yeah, probably like they get up pretty early because school starts pretty early. So you probably get up at 5 or 6 a.m. And then you would maybe get a snack or tea, but it sort of depends on like if there was, how much food there was, and like if there was milk that day or not. Then they'd probably go to school, and the school would be a public school, so that means like sometimes the teachers would show up and sometimes they wouldn't.
But it's not, is it school within the orphanage? Or?
It can. So the one, like the main one that our kids came from, it was a school that was right next door, but it was not, but it was like not really affiliated. Like there were other kids that were outside, but most of all the kids from that.
Because like, if life wasn't rough enough, now you got to go to a public school. It's like, oh look, the orphans are coming.
Yeah,
right.
Well, and that's true.
Kids.
You're completely right. There's so much stigma.
Yeah.
And you know, even our kids now, they go to like it's like a private school, and they're like very uncomfortable telling their closest friends like their family situation. You know, it's like there's so much stigma in Nepal about being, because it's all your family, it's all who you know, it's all, you know, who you're descended from and what caste you are and like all that stuff. It's still so
or those
prevalent.
things matter, right? Like, who are your parents? In so many cultures, that's the first question they ask you.
Oh yeah, completely. And like and in Nepal, it's like your last name is basically like what caste you are. So like it's taken us time to like train the kids to be like, you don't have to share your last name. Like if you don't want to, you don't have to, you know?
You hear that word a lot, caste.
Yeah.
What exactly is a caste system?
So basically it's like, it's a system of a hierarchy of ethnicity, essentially. So it could be like
ethnicity.
Yeah. So like in Nepal, there's like over 60, maybe 80 different ethnic tribes. And then there's basically a hierarchy of them. So like at the top are Brahmins or Bowans, and they're found in India as well. And then there's like different types of tribes. I'm Gurung, which is like a hill tribe. So we're like in the middle of the pack kind of.
Sure.
But then there's certain tribes that have also like come into like money or fame for certain things. Like the Sherpas are like sort of, I think about us, maybe above Gurungs. And they're known for like being in the Everest region. So like Tenzin Norgay Sherpa was like the first like Nepali to summit Mount Everest. And like a lot of Sherpas will help and work in the tourist industry around Everest. And actually they like make a ton of money doing that. So, you know, they've sort of like risen because of like the fame and the money. Gurungs, my tribe, they like in the British Army, they made a name for themselves as being like the Gurkha part of the British Army, and they are like very known for being very fierce and very like good soldiers.
Yeah.
And then they all got British pensions and came back to Nepal to live, so they had all this extra income. So a lot of them are now in like the tourist industry, you know, having like hotels or restaurants or trekking companies and stuff like that. And then there's like the lower ones, which are like Dalits or like untouchables. So and usually that's like you see like darker skinned people or and there's like a whole history of like certain tribes having certain jobs too, and then also those jobs sort of being like the untouchables are like servant class basically. And there's even things where like if you're untouchable, like you don't go into like a Hindu puja room, like where like Hindus would do ceremonies and stuff like that.
How do they know?
A lot of it is like skin color and features, facial features. So like, and you know, I think it's like the more time I spend in Nepal, the more I'm like, oh, that person looks like Gurung like me, or that person like looks like whatever this other Newari is like native to like the Kathmandu Valley. So there's like a lot of Newaris, and that's sort of like a higher caste as well, because they've built more wealth because they were like in the valley and stuff like that. Yeah, and it's actually interesting because, so it's basically a hierarchy of like a social system, basically. But there's a really cool book by Isabel Wilkerson, I think. And she wrote it recently, and it's called Caste, but it's basically a look at
Is this
racism.
recent?
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah,
It's
I've seen it.
Great, yeah. And it's basically the idea of like a caste system operating in America in regards to race.
Okay, I was going to ask you, because I feel like a lot of the examples are probably that you've mentioned are easy to understand within that world, but in a Western mindset, it's hard to picture what that looks like in our life, right? Like, I mean, does it affect you when you go to Starbucks to order? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, that's such a good question, because you're right. It's like, it is, you're like, oh, great. That's like a system that exists in another place. I understand it intellectually, but I wouldn't feel like I'd ever be a participant in it, kind of. Yeah. And you're right. Like, I think, okay, so take the Starbucks example, even though there isn't a Starbucks like in Nepal, like, I think it would, because it's like there's only a certain strata of people who can afford to go to Starbucks. There's only, you know, and who have the time in the day to go do it, and who have a job that like isn't like manual labor or, you know, like hauling rocks or like whatever. So I'm sort of like mixing locations, but basically, you know, I think that one thing too that's really important is like a lot, and it's changing a little bit here and there, but like a lot of people want you to marry within your caste too.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I guess if it were America, we're racialized, right? It's like the idea of like marrying someone outside of your race or your culture is still for some families like not really done.
Right.
You know, and the whole like anti-miscegenation laws in U.S. history, right? It was like, let's preserve like this caste or this, you know, group. So
seeing how like there's a caste system, there's a hierarchy, wouldn't you want to move out of your caste to like a higher?
Yeah, but that's a really good question. And now we might be getting into things that I'm just speculating. I don't really have much knowledge of, but I think also because of that, like, right, the classes at the top would want to protect themselves from getting diluted, quote unquote, by like.
So they wouldn't even go for it.
Yeah.
That's where you get that's when you get the Romeo and Juliet type movies.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Oh, I'd love to do a Romeo and Juliet set in Nepal. That's a whole other thing.
There is nothing stopping you.
Yes, no, exactly.
And seeing you're going in the right trajectory, actually.
Yes, yeah, and yeah, I'm writing a film right now that's like a dance movie set in Nepal, so we'll see how that ends up.
Wait, so did we finish saying about my day in my life?
Oh yeah, no, I guess
Okay, so go to school.
Okay, go to school.
Be called orphan by the kids.
Yeah,
not
definitely.
tell my last name.
Exactly. You maybe have your teachers show up. You maybe not. Like you're not gonna have clothes that fit properly. You're probably wearing like hand-me-downs that are like like falling apart and too ill-fitting. You may.
And this is clothes that maybe has been left over, or that people from the city just donate or going to throw away, or how do they even go about getting that clothes?
Probably both. Yeah, probably both. Either donated, and like, some families will like donate stuff in Nepal. It's not a huge culture of that kind of thing, but probably foreigners would come and like give you a bag of old trekking clothes or something like that. And then also, in Nepal, they wear school uniforms. So it might be like a kid who was like 3 years older than you, who's like now not in that class, like handed down old clothes to you. And same with like supplies and stuff, like notebooks. Like you might get like a donor who brings like you a new notebook once a year or something like that. But other than that, you'll probably use hand-me-downs for textbooks and school supplies. And then you come back to like just go right back next door for snack or lunch. And that could be, a pack of biscuits, or it could be like nothing, kind of depends. It's probably not going to be super nutritious, like fruit or eggs or anything super filling. And then you go back to school, come back for dinner. The typical meal in Nepal is called dal bhat, which is like lentil soup and rice. So one thing that we were working to do was try to get like healthy substantial dal bhat with like great with meat and with like vegetables and stuff like that, but usually it'd be like a watery dal and like kind of poorly cooked rice, and then you sort of stay up, and if you're
it seems just
survival.
Keeping me alive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then it's like, if you're dedicated to your studies, then you spend your time like trying to, get light to like study. Or the thing that's really concerning is there's no supervision. So it's like you could decide
the kids run away.
And they run away, and like sometimes they get lost. And there's also kids with mental like illnesses or disabilities and stuff who don't get the care that they need, and they can like go off the grounds and get completely lost. And like it's just really. And
is there an underworld in Nepal that like Carlos hates it. I'm tired of the biscuits. I don't try to make it out on my own, so I flee out in the middle of the night.
I think there is.
Yeah,
and especially if you
because are there drugs and things like that over there?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's like street kids too, and there's a lot of people that work with street kids, and like little Carlos could decide that he wants to go out on his own and have the freedom of being like a street kid. And it's been really I don't know a lot about it, but there's a lot of people who try to work with street kids in Nepal, and it's very hard because these kids like there is a freedom to that lifestyle, and that's what they want and like, and if you do it in the tourist area, tourists take pity on you and they give you like their leftover pizza, and you're like, cool, I got pizza from the nicest place in town. Like, my life's great. So
is there, I guess, is there a way out? Like, I mean, not a way out, but like, especially you describe me that it's a caste system, right? Once you're old enough to just go out in the world. Like, is there like a success story to this? Like, if you don't get adopted?
Yes. Yeah. I think the best thing, and the thing that we hope for our kids is that they can take care of themselves and respect themselves and make enough money to be independent and be doing something that makes them happy. Okay. And so it's for us, it's about giving them exposure to opportunity. It's about giving them the opportunities, and it's about supporting them to navigate those opportunities, because they're not looking to their parents to see how to do it. They're not looking to their aunts or uncles or older siblings to be this is how I'm successful, or this is what I have to do to be sort of successful. It's a lot of working with our kids to be what makes you happy, which is a hard question for them too, and also in a caste system, you're really taught not to question the system, right? So it's why would I ask myself if doing art makes me happy? Because I might not ever be able to do art. So it's a moot point, so it's taken us years to get this information out of the kids, and then also give them enough opportunity for them to be oh, I think I want to be a karate person, and then realize oh, I don't like karate, or the sensei is really mean, I'm not going to do karate anymore, or oh, I want to be a football player, and it's weat, we'll put you in basketball or football, and then it's oh yeah, that's really fun, but I don't want to do that as a living, or and so and one of our kids right now, she wants to be an airplane pilot, and part of that is just because I happen to have a really good friend who married this amazing woman who's a huge proponent of getting females into the flight programs in Nepal. And she's came and spoke to the kids, and Durga, one of our eldest, is that sounds cool. I want to do that. And I'm she's never been on a plane. She might get on a plane and be just kidding. Yeah. But, so yeah. So anyway, but in terms of the best case scenario, that's what we hope for. But I think the real scenario is, the kids, there is a growing class of kids who are coming up through these hundreds of children's homes in Nepal, and they have to figure out a way to live and survive. And sometimes that means I think it actually is opening up a space for sort of an American individualized understanding of life, in that they don't have family they're going to live with until they get married. So they have to move into apartments with 4 of their best friends and share, live on a shoestring budget, which is in a way very American youth, right? And they have to figure out can they even get themselves a job, and and what is important to them. And they, in a way, even though it's very scary, it's they don't have the same tenants holding them in, I think. And so on my more optimistic days, I think this is really exciting, and maybe there's more and more kids, so if they can't find a nice family to marry into, but they want to have a romance and a family and a marriage, there's a whole class of kids who are orphans, or who grew up in children's homes, who understand that life and understand each other in a way that they can find each other and create a life together.
Were there things specifically that that you saw from other orphanages or other group homes that you said, no, we're going to do things differently here?
Yeah.
Specifically in these areas? What were they?
Yeah, well, definitely size was one of them. Some great homes in Nepal have 70 kids, have 35 kids, have 200 kids, and and it's for us, we were we want it to be a family. So that means we cap it at 12 kids maximum.
Do they range in ages? Or?
Yeah. Our kids right now are 10 to 16. Yeah. But when we got them, they were 5 to 13. Okay. Yeah. And, so we were really committed to having a family size, really committed to, this individualized care system, instead of making it an institution, one size fits all kind of thing. You either it works for you or it doesn't. We really are trying to find, what kind of help support learning style stuff the kids are. The education system in Nepal is kind of very specific to one learning style, I'll say. So not all of our kids are into it, and some are really thriving, and some are clearly just don't learn by rote memorization, and so we try to show them other ways that they can be successful and do things that are important to them, and be successful in those.
Can I give you a suggestion for those kids?
Yeah.
Content creation homes. teach them how to become YouTubers, TikTokers.
That's actually really interesting.
If you really want to help them around, if you really want to help them this day and age, have them become TikTokers.
We had this one kid and he's like, was going to school online, like screwed him because he would just sit there and like play video games all day on the computer. Right. And I literally went through this thing of like, do we just like be like, sure, you can play games all day as long as you put yourself on film and you get 50 followers every day. You know what I mean?
That's the real world, Arun. That's the real world.
I know. And it's true. Like two of our girls are sisters and they are incredible artists. Like, and they're addicted to anime. They're like anime all day, every day. Yeah. And like manga, bring us manga, and, but they're like, and they showed me all of their, some of their pictures and stuff. And Noah's like, they just draw husbandos. It's all husbandos. Yeah. And I was like, it is. It's like a portfolio of husbandos. Yeah. And it's so great. And I'm like, it's true. I think that there's a part of, like even, anywhere, like you want to do, your parents want the best for you. They want you to do something that's going to like, make you happy and make you money and blah, blah, blah. And like being in the arts myself, it's like, sometimes that's like not as important to like the kid or whatever. And to sort of help our kiddos be like, there is a path for you through the arts if that's what you want, like no forcing them into that, of course, but like, you don't have to like go to school and get a BA and a master's if that's not what you want. If you want to go animate tomorrow, like start animating now. Like I'm working with one of our eldest who wants to go to art school. And I'm like, even though art school in Nepal doesn't ask you to have a portfolio, you say you want to be an animator, start building your portfolio now. So every week I check in with her about like, different characters she's creating in the story, and it's like that stuff that, we can do and I can work with our kids on and stuff. So I don't know. I'm like talking a lot.
It's kind of like if that's the point.
Yeah. I'm like, blah, blah.
But I think stuff like that is super important because, depending on your surroundings, it's going to be what you're exposed to.
Yes, right.
Where, being a young kid, young little Mexican kid living in East LA, chances are I probably don't know too much about surfing and sailing and stuff like that. Maybe the idea of being an artist for a video game, like, wait, who does that even exist? Like, what? No, that's not me. I don't know how that happens, but that's definitely not me. Yeah. But there's definitely, think about, and this is kind of like what tripped me out. I did a trip up to, it was Google headquarters, right? It was like for a tournament of some sort.
Cool.
And there was just a whole bunch of people. I mean, it's up north, Silicon Valley. So there's a bunch of little kids running around, right? And like, one of their dads works for NVIDIA, another one of their, their mom works for Facebook, another, just like in all tech, right? Yeah. So when you have that conversation with them, they're already like, oh yeah, I want to be an engineer. Yeah. Or like a visual effects artist.
Yeah.
Like, you're like 4. Oh yeah, I know, but I got a Cintiq already, and I'm like, and it's just because that's the world that's around. That's what they're exposed to. So they feel, no, why wouldn't I be able to do this?
Yeah.
Huh? That's weird. Well, like if you don't grow up around that, that is an alien world. Yeah. And that's the one thing that's one reason why, whenever there's a chance for me to volunteer, to speak to like inner city kids or just like, places where I would have been where that world it doesn't exist. It's not it's nothing that I can even think about myself doing. Letting them know like, no, you can totally work in these fields. It's not crazy, yes, there's such thing as an artist, out there that you can make money out of, just think about the world around you. So I can only imagine, like in that world, how much further that may seem. Right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of just like this world of accessibility and opportunity and like realizing that it is so ingrained in like what you grow up in. And it's like, you know, like film industry families, it's like, of course it's like easier if your parents are like on set every day and they understand that already. Or like doctor families, you know, it's like,
I think Steven Spielberg got his first camera like at 4 and made his first film at 5.
Yes.
You know
okay.
what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, and so just to have something, some world that you are like learning more about and being encouraged about, like from the inside out. Yeah. But sorry, your question?
I don't know.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I got another question.
Yeah.
How do you deal with it emotionally? Because it's tough. I mean, you know, when I go back to visit Mexico, I always come back with like a sense of gratefulness for my situation, even my situation when I immigrated over here. Because I think to myself like, oh, I wonder what it'd been if I would have stayed there, you know, because definitely don't have the same opportunities. But knowing that some of my family still kind of lives like that, there's like this sense of guilt sometimes, you know? And now you're working directly with kids. So it's like, how do you manage that emotionally?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good question. Can I just ask you really fast? What was your situation how old were you when you immigrated and what happened?
So I was born in Puebla, Mexico.
Okay.
And we came here, I think when I was around 10, I want to say like 10 or 11. And it wasn't anything. I mean, we had family over there. My dad was coming, like bouncing between the U.S. and Mexico, just like coming over here, making money, coming back home. Like we had like a little liquor store and stuff like that. So we were actually okay.
Yeah,
we were actually okay. But you know, when you're working here and the paycheck for 2 weeks, it's something that like 4 months.
Yes,
it's pretty convincing. You know, and they sold me with Mickey Mouse.
Gosh dang, Mickey Mouse.
Yeah, they're like, don't you want to go to Disneyland? You know, I only live 30 minutes away from it. What? They got me with meeting Michael Jackson, which was the biggest lie. Maybe for the good, but it was the biggest lie.
True. It's probably better that never happened.
Cute little Mexican kid. Wow.
Just come snuggle with me, Carlos.
According to the movies, I'm not even his type.
Okay, I haven't watched it yet. I can't.
I wouldn't. Promise of Hamburgers.
Okay, yes.
And Disneyland. And other than Michael Jackson, they made good on their best. I mean, you know, it was quite a journey to get here because we, you know, in Mexico it's extremely hard to immigrate here. Because, I mean, I don't remember the process exactly because I was so little, but just from what I know is you have to go to their embassy first or the immigration office. And then you have to say, okay, you want to go. And then you have to kind of basically, you have to prove that you're not going to stay there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's just to come like on vacation.
Yeah.
You know, it's not even like, hey, I want to live there.
Yeah.
If you want to live there, they're like, okay, cool. Here's this application. How are you you need to prove in advance that you're going to, like, you can afford to live there.
Yeah.
And that you're not going to be, whatever, a leech or whatever.
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
So you already have to have like made it in order to come here.
Yeah.
And then you put your application and then you got to wait about 15 years.
Yeah.
You know, and depending on like, you know, your economic situation and stuff like that, that's a matter, for some people, it's a matter of life and death. You know, lucky for us, that wasn't the case. But we came by here by all means necessary. You know?
Yeah.
Let's just say I know the trunk of a Buick really well.
Wow. But
you know, but what ended up happening is like once we were here, my dad had started the immigration system for us. So, and this is like back in the 80s. So it was a little bit different because once our papers got processed and they're like, oh, but you guys are here illegally. Okay, here, just pay this fine. You know?
Yeah.
So now you just pay this fine.
Yeah.
But now you can go through the process. The whole process still took us about 10 years to do.
Wow.
But now it's even harder.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
what was the whole point of that?
That's crazy. Oh, well, just emotionally going, and then but you still go back to Mexico now.
Yeah. Because I mean, pretty much most of my family's all still there, you know? But yeah, so I was kind of like excited about coming here just because it's America, you know, like all the TV shows that you watch. Again, Michael Jackson. Anyway, so as soon as I arrived, right, because I remember like the moment, because like I said, it was like in the trunk of a car, and then, you know, we're driving, and then it stops in here, you know, knock knock. I'm like, oh crap, because he told me about this. They're like, just play. Okay. And then it's my dad and his friend. It was funny because he worked at a casino, and you know, we've been trying to cross the border. Yeah. And his boss, who's this like blonde-haired, blue-eyed lady, was like, "Any luck?" It's like, "No, like it just, you know, keep getting caught at the border. The passport doesn't look right. You know, paperwork, so all this stuff." So she was like, "I'll go. Don't worry." And so his boss, you know, put him in the passenger seat, and put me in the trunk of a, you know, we went in TJ or whatever, put me in the trunk of a car. No questions asked, just gone.
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing. That's wow.
And it was so crazy because like, I got out of the car, went into the back seat, and I just fell asleep. Yeah. But I remember waking up and going through what I believe now is kind of like where the 101, where all the freeways are at, right downtown LA is at. And it was just like the crazy, like an alien futuristic world. Seeing something with so many lights and all the cars going, traffic, it blew me away. Wow. And then, so as soon as we got to the house, it's like, "You want a hamburger?" I'm like, "Yes." He made good on his promise of a hamburger. Wow. And I love hamburgers ever since.
Oh my God. That's a movie right there. That's amazing.
But you know what? I don't feel that story is very uncommon. Yeah. To be honest with you.
No, I mean, I think you're right.
Like when I get together with like Hispanic friends, it's like everybody has some sort of like story like that or knows somebody with a story like that.
Yeah. Wow.
But like how were you saying, like, you know, seeing that and seeing it now, what I've grown up to be, sometimes, you know, when I go back there, I'm like, fuck, man, the kid, like his shoe is flopping around, right? And you just want to go and like, "Hey kid, you know, go buy yourself some shoes and stuff." And you're dealing with it in an even different way because, you know, it's like orphanages, and I mean, that pulls on the heartstrings, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one thing you said of like feeling like if you hadn't come to America, you know, when you did, you would have been living a very different kind of life. And it doesn't mean it would be worse, but it's just very different. And there just are resources that you have at your fingertips now that you wouldn't have in that other sort of like plane of, I always think of it like a multiverse. Like the other.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it. Yeah. You know what? That's a mental health shit.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, oh, this isn't reality. It's just a multiverse. Exactly. Everything's fine.
Totally. In some other multiverse, it is going great. Yeah. No, I literally tell myself that about a lot of stuff. Yeah. But yeah, just like, I do think that there's this feeling because I was adopted and also have a pretty good understanding of what it would have been like had I not been adopted, that like I just naturally feel, I think a lot of the things that I have in life are because of chance. And like, not that I don't work hard every day because I bust my bum, but like, you know, it's just how it is. And so like, it's very easy for me to understand that like we need to be like giving back. Oh my gosh. Giving back as much as we can, whenever we can, in any way we can, because like it's only chance that like I have as much as I have. And there's so many people around the world who don't. And so, yeah. And then like in terms of the like emotional toll of sort of seeing, you know, what the worst of what can happen in Nepal to kids. And the way that I handle it is by like trying to take action with the things that I can control.
What kind of stuff happens to kids?
Yeah, I mean, just like
sold as workers or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. You know, sold as domestic workers, sold to traffickers. You know, like I worked for this one organization, and we got to go on a fact-finding mission, like from Nepal to Mumbai to the red light district there to see like the path that little Nepali girls and boys were taking. You know, and it was like, it's just so messy. And then it was like, oh, turns out like things are actually pretty good. And like, they've really done a good job stemming trafficking from Nepal to India. But what's happening is like kids from the village are getting trafficked to like big cities in Nepal, and like for sex trafficking and domestic like labor and stuff like that. And it's just like, it's just ugly. Like kids have so little protection, and there's just so much poverty that people are, you know, desperate. And, and so, it's like and then also the things of like, you can hand a kid every opportunity, no matter where they're growing up, and they can still like make bad choices, you know, because they're kids and they don't know better. And so, you know, we've talked to a lot of people who run homes who have been in Nepal running homes for kids for a lot longer than we have, you know, and sometimes they have these great success stories, and sometimes they're like, yeah, like this kid got pregnant when they were 15, and like now we have like a super baby in our home, you know? And it's like, and that's the work we do when we say we're going to care for these kids, you know, is like for their mistakes as well. And that's the same way, you know, like we want to be a family, we want to be a home. Like if I had a daughter and she had a child when she was a teenager, like out of wedlock, of course I would do everything in my power to care for her and the child. Right. So it's like that sort of funny, like professional we are an organization, but we're also trying to create a family for these kids, and that they will feel supported even in their mistakes. You know?
You know what? I wonder what the difference is in people themselves, where, I mean, I feel most people want to help. Most people are well-meaning.
Yes.
You know how you were saying, what did you call that term? You know, when I'm just going to go paint a wall somewhere.
Voluntourism.
Voluntourism.
Yeah.
Because I've heard about that, and I was like, isn't any good like
better than
nothing?
Yeah.
And you would know more than that, right? On whether that's true or not. But I feel that most people would just be like, you know, I really feel bad for this. Like, can I just send $20, right? Or, man, I really want to do something. Let me just like repost the article. Like, I need to bring awareness to this thing, you know?
Yeah.
But then there's people like you that say, crack their knuckles. All right, let's go. Let's actually make direct change.
Yeah.
You know, I wonder why that happens. Like, why don't more people do that? Like, do what you're doing and help people directly? Because me personally, I feel like that's where you get the real change, right?
Yeah, you know,
or maybe the biggest impact. I'm saying
that's I would love to know the answer to that, because I think you're right. There is sort of, and you know, it's funny too, doing this work. I can't tell you how many times people are like, "Oh, great, so like you're Christian," and I'm like, no, I don't need like a religion to tell me to do good things for my fellow humans, you know? And not that, I mean, there's a lot of amazing work going on that's religiously, motivated, and we've gotten a lot of, donations from, people who do that because they feel, but not so to not.
Or you're saying that some people assume that when you're kind of doing something like that hands-on, that it must be with an organization,
like a missionary or
something.
Yeah, okay. Exactly. Because like, why else would you do it if it wasn't like your church or your God telling you to?
Well, why did you do it? Why not just donate?
Yeah, it's because it was like,
why not just call their congressperson?
Yeah, that's interesting. That never crossed my mind to just not do anything.
Like, don't blame me. Don't blame me, Nepali children.
Exactly.
I'm just asking a question. You're just like, wait, I actually could.
I could have just called my congressperson. Damn it. Yeah. So I don't know. I do think also I really have to attribute to my mom and my stepdad, because they have always been, that's another thing. Like, I've been very lucky. Like, my dad really, so my dad and my mom are divorced. They got divorced after they adopted me when I was pretty young. But like, my mom and my stepdad have 100% enabled me to start Kumari Project. Like, my stepdad's the head of the board. My mom like comes with me to Nepal all the time and uses her, like, they're both retired now, so they just use all of their like professional experience to like help Kumari Project be like this great organization. And they were the ones who were like, like, I moved home a couple years after college when I was doing some nonprofit work, and then decided to like try to start this one. And they were like, yeah, we'll help you do it. Like, we're gonna like get it done. And like, to this day, they're so dedicated to it. So it's like, and like my mom says the kids are like her grandkids and stuff like that. So it's like,
did they raise you like that to be kind of like socially conscious?
you know, my mom's like very activist in nature, but she's not like, you must do this thing to, I was always like a, A+ student and all that stuff. And I really took it to heart. Like, the service learning we had to do for our college applications, like I was like, I like this. It's nice to help people. And I think the more I learned about nonprofit work, the more I learned about the sustainable impact. And I think that was really hot in the early 2000s too. It's like, how do we make a sustainable impact? So I don't know I've never been asked that. That's so interesting. I never considered another way. But
the world is better for it, right?
Yeah.
Where you not just do a GoFundMe somewhere.
Yeah. But it is really funny too, because I do think like one thing with the idea of like, well-intentioned versus like doing nothing, like I think I have evolved in terms of my understanding too of what the best way to give and what the best way to help is. And like I think the last iteration of Black Lives Matter in 2022, like I really learned like this idea of like well-intentioned isn't enough, it's okay to say that, and it's okay to like question like people when they're like, but I'm doing something, and you're like, but really are you? And with voluntourism and the more research that's coming out about that, it's like, there are actually negative effects, and like you just have to sort of like think through the life cycle of your actions. Yeah, which we're not trained to do. Right.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I'm going to say. We're not really trained to do that, right? We're like in our minds, like, I'm going to do this good thing for these people that need it. What's the problem?
Yeah.
Now, did any of this stuff, like your volunteering and besides from your parents, did it get nurtured in college at all? Or because where did you go to school?
Yeah, so I went to Yale. That's where Noah and I met.
Look at you.
Yeah. I know. It was amazing. I mean,
I was trying to get something to rhyme from orphan to I don't know, were you in a sorority out there? I don't know.
Oh yeah, no.
I can't make it rhyme orphan and yell.
Yeah.
But what a success story.
Thanks. I think there was like this cool program at Yale that was it was actually voluntourism, and it was like trying to get kids to like go take their spring break and like go somewhere else and do like a service trip. And as much as I sort of have come to the other end of that, like I definitely was like all in at that time. Like I went to the Dominican Republic for 2 years in a row, and I like did a fundraiser back home for the summer in between.
You've been busy for a while.
And then I started doing like trips to Nepal when I was a senior with that program too. And and then like I think it's really important, a lot of kids don't get the chance to travel too. And I think that's like Noah, he never traveled growing up. And it's so funny because to me, like my mom loved travel. So that's, we always do that together. Like even after like college, she'd be like, great, you want to go to like this place with me? And I'd be like, yeah, let's go, you know? And just traveling.
Did you travel when you were younger as well?
Mostly just in Nepal, but like my mom loves outdoors. So we'd go to Alaska a lot. Okay. And domestically, like and my dad and my stepmom, we'd like do road trips and go to the national parks and stuff.
Yeah. I think that's so important for children.
Yes.
And you don't necessarily need to take your 10-year-old to Paris.
Yeah.
But just having a different scenery, if you live in a city, going camping, just them exposed to different things. Even going to different states, people talk different, people look different, people eat different things. It's super important, because if you go to LA and you go to New Orleans, 2 different cultures, same country, but being exposed to just that is huge.
Yeah, it is. And it's really interesting. I remember going to college and I was like surprised by how many people didn't have passports, or like had, and it's funny too, like with Yale, like I grew up in a really white neighborhood. So I was like, Yale's the most diverse place I've ever been. And then there were people that were at Yale that were like, this is the whitest place I've ever been. And, it just threw into relief how like we all have our little bubbles of understanding the world. And like, until we're faced with something else, we will never question it. Yeah.
Where did you grow up in LA or?
I grew up in Eugene, Oregon. Eugene.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's very white.
Yeah,
That's very white.
Still to this day, yeah.
What did you study in Yale?
Oh, yeah.
That's super interesting.
Yeah, so I double majored in theater studies and ethnicity, race, and migration.
What?
Yeah.
Ethnicity, race, and migration.
Yeah, we called it ERNM for short.
How are you not a diversity and inclusion CEO right now?
Yeah.
Somewhere?
Oh, you are.
No.
Oh.
So, no, how come you're
Oh,
not?
how come I'm not? I thought you said you were hiring.
No,
I was
no,
like,
no.
oh, I know. Well, see, it's really funny.
What is that exactly?
Well, yeah.
Because all those are like super huge freaking
Big
words.
things.
Yeah.
The basically it's like I sort of say it's cultural studies, and it was very personalizable, which was amazing. It was a pretty new major. It was a really small major. We had it was like amazing. People in my class, they were all like.
Is this like mid 2000s or?
Yeah,
okay.
mid 2000s. Yes, late 2000s.
I said mid just because I was like, I'm just gonna throw it out there. Don't want to say early. Yeah.
I appreciate it. But they, and like it was really cool because it was kind of like. All these different ethnicities like coming together. It was a really small major, and it was like we could basically specialize in like different sort of areas. So I did like Latin studies and like Asian American studies, and sort of like, so, I took a few classes on like migration patterns, and then also because of like theater, like I took this one class that was amazing, like Theaters of the Black Atlantic, and it was like about like culture and migration through theater, and like it was so cool.
Okay.
And
that sounds like some college shit for
sure.
sure.
I know, right? I was like, I loved it, and then I got so done with academia because I'm a hands-on person, right? Like I want to have a direct impact, and I was just like, I don't think I can do that with academia, but that I could have.
What did you learn about kind of like migration?
Yeah, well,
like migration patterns and like who's moving? Is it like who's moving where? Why are they leaving? Things like that, or
and also like a lot of it had to do with the like policies in America of like accepting people that were not white, and like it was mostly like migration patterns in the 1900s, and like like I didn't have any like non-Western history, non-European history in school growing up. So like it was all new information to me, like the Exclusion Act. I mean, like we maybe talked about it for like 5 minutes in a class, like growing up, and like we read a book on Japanese internment, but it wasn't like a big deal or anything. And it was mostly about like, anyway. Learning about like the history of like Sikh migration, like through Vancouver, and like, and a lot of stuff. Oh, like one thing that was really cool in my Asian American history class was, which was the only class, maybe the first class, and maybe the only class I've ever had where a professor, no, not my only class, but like one of 3 classes I've ever had, and they were all at college, that had a female Asian American teacher. And she, we talked about, like the emasculinization of like Asian American men in media, and like also the, the tropes of like the Asian female seductress and femme fatale, or like the domestic, like servile, like, Asian female, and like the model minority myth, and like talking about that, and which was like news to me. And, people would be like, oh, you're Asian, like you're good at math, like in high school. And I was like, well, I am Asian and I am good at math. Yeah. Okay. And then it was like, oh no, wait, that's taking away like the fact that I work really hard to be good at math. It's not because of my genes, right? And recently I took this amazing workshop with these 2 people out in the East Coast that was talking about like sort of dismantling white supremacy via the dismantling the model minority myth, and like how like sort of the tenets of white supremacy are upheld by the tenets of the model minority myth. Anyway, just
what does that mean?
So basically, I'm going to totally butcher it. But basically, so the model minority myth, right, is sort of that like Asians have these stereotypical qualities that are like inherent to them. So like we're hardworking, we're smart, we're smart, good at math. We're quiet, we'll like just keep our heads down and do our work. We won't cause a fuss, we won't create any confrontation. We'll just do what we're told. And basically, like, the idea of this dismantling white supremacy was like how there was an author who I can't remember who basically wrote these 7 tenets of white supremacy, and how like one of them is like trying to think this idea of having a standard that like you overwork yourself, you just do like and if your leadership like overworks themselves, like then everyone else is expected to. So even if you're off the clock, you're still expected to work or something. And so like the idea of like being Asian and hardworking and like continuing to sort of like fall into that would uphold this, like one of the tenets of white supremacy in the workplace specifically. I don't think I explained that very well, but
no, you did.
Okay, good. But yeah, and I think it was interesting too, like this idea too of the model minority myth, like learning that it was developed by like the U.S. government in response to like the civil rights era, and like here's an example of the good minorities versus the ones who are making trouble, and how before that, you know, Asian men were like vilified and you know, made like the dangerous monsters that like African American men were, because they were going to take the virginity of your white innocent wives and girls and daughters and stuff. And anyway, and just seeing how like race and ethnicity is like used as a tool too, and realizing too that like race is a social construct, and yet it does have like real like real everyday effects and like political and policy related effects. And anyway, sort of just, and for me personally, the whole ER&M pursuit really helped me just like learn about identity and cultural identity and hybrid identity, and like, you know, figuring out how I am American. You know, it's sort of that thing I think anyone has, and you might identify with this, but it's like when I went to Nepal, I also realized like I was never felt more American than when I was in Nepal. And when I was in America, I never felt more like non-white American. And so, you know, how do I put that together and like studying?
Do you view yourself as American?
I do. Yeah.
Because sometimes, like I was having a conversation with my friend Nancy, who's Vietnamese, right? Vietnamese American. And we both kind of like, we didn't even think about it, but we were like, oh, because you know like how Americans are, right? Where they're like, oh, wait, but we're Americans. You know, but it's like for so long, it's just been like, you know, like, no, not really. You know, like Americans are like white and black people. You know, we're all just kind of like here, but like they're the Americans, you know?
Oh, that's interesting. So you guys wouldn't like initially identify yourselves?
No, but I do obviously, but like there's still stuff in my brain that I guess, you know, still views it as that.
Yeah.
You know, so it seems like, you know, like recently, there's a lot of spotlight on, you know, Asian, violence against Asians, and then, you know, the model minority stuff coming up. But one thing that I didn't see brought up is, I'm not sure if I think it's a couple years old. And I think it was with Yale. I'm not sure if it was like Yale or Harvard.
Oh, the emissions stuff?
Yeah, the emissions. Because to me, when I think about something that should be brought up within this conversation, that's huge. Yeah.
You know, I kind of remember following it a little bit and then sort of being like, but it was saying that, because
we're going to cut down the amount of Asian people that we allow into Harvard to give other people a chance.
Yeah.
Basically, they're doing too good. Yale's basically saying, if we let it go, Yale's just going to be Asian.
Yeah. I think, you know, it might have been Harvard, but yes, yeah, you know, and it's interesting.
Is there really a difference?
There's a
You're like,
difference.
absolutely, motherfucker.
It's so funny because, like, I don't know.
Is there tier? Okay, so what's tier list in Ivy School leagues? So what are the Ivy schools? There's Yale, Harvard.
I couldn't even name them. I think
Stanford, one of those.
I think they call that the West Coast Ivy.
Okay.
Princeton. I think Cornell, Penn, Dartmouth.
All those sound like trash.
Notre Dame. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They're the trash Ivies.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, good. I'm glad we're clear.
And then what do you get into Oxford and because they're like sister campuses, right? Yale, Harvard, and Cambridge.
You know,
Oxford and stuff?
Not really.
No?
We're basically just based all of our stuff on them.
Oh, okay.
We're like, oh, we aged these buildings so they look like they're the age of Cambridge or Oxford, but they're not.
Gotcha.
So they're modeled after that in like terms of like the system. Yeah, not houses, but colleges.
But what are your thoughts on that?
On the like Ivy tier stuff?
No, on the admissions.
Oh, admission. Oh, thank you. Sorry. Yes. Yeah. Well, a couple things. One, I mean, I think.
Do you think that's right?
I think we need to do. I guess. Was it to make more room for like any people of color, or was it just to make more room for like white people too? I can't really.
I don't really remember.
Yeah.
To be honest
Yeah.
with you.
I mean, I think that it's hard because there's. So one of the jobs I do is I tutor also, and like I've never tutored a Black kid. I've never I don't think. Yeah. And, and it's like, and the families pay a lot of money and it's like, and there are only certain families that can afford that. And then they get the premier education. They're the ones who are set up to go to the Ivies. Like and I wasn't in that category of thing. I was just very,
But you don't
lucky.
think that's more of a money thing?
Yeah, well, exactly. And so I think that what, Yale should be looking at not only is, or Yale or Harvard, anyone, admissions is not only ethnicity, but socioeconomic diversity. And I know that Yale does that. I think it could do more of that. I think all of the Ivies could do more of it, but also like their endowment is so huge because they don't just, it's
you
like,
know what it seems like? Like when this country was coming to its creation, right? People didn't have foresight, to be like, this is kind of a crazy ass experiment that we're doing.
Yeah.
That's completely different than any other place. Because like, if you go to China, right, it's pretty much Chinese people and some others that may work there here and there and tourists.
Yeah.
But for the most part, that's what it is, right?
Yeah.
Same thing. You go to Korea, it's like Koreans and tourists.
Yeah.
And so many other countries are like that. But then you come to the US and it's like, it's a party.
Yeah.
It's not, there's white people and this. No, it's like, there's everybody here, right?
Yeah.
And I think we're at the point where we're kind of in a pickle.
Yeah.
We're kind of in a pickle because there's a lot of these things that are the American values, right? Where we want to reward hard work, right?
Yes.
And hence why, there's people that would say like, oh, that's totally wrong. Like if Asian people are just working harder, putting all the time in, then why should we give somebody else that slot that should go to an Asian person that's not working as hard, but just because of their skin color, they get that spot, right?
Yeah.
So we have that, right?
Yeah.
But then you go through this whole systematic overview of a thing and like, well, why is it like that?
Yeah. Yes.
And then maybe like this person, because of their socioeconomic, where they're at, doesn't have the same opportunities. So maybe we should open those doors to make it easy and then start another flow of people. Because what that's going to happen is chances are that person's going to be successful. And then, if they have a family, they're going to pass all those things on. Going to college is going to become a tradition and then own a home and then be exposed to surfing.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. The American dream.
Yeah. And so you have that. Well, like, oh, well, that kind of sounds good too. Right.
Yeah.
And then you have the other thing where it's just like, well, now kind of like all this stuff that goes on, it's kind of racisty towards white people too. And that will have its own repercussions as well, because then at that point now nothing's like really clearly defined either. Right. Yeah. And so it's super complicated.
I think, you're totally right. Like, I remember listening to something on NPR, like right when Biden got elected, and it was like, actually Democrats like have a hard time getting stuff done when there's a Democrat in the presidency, because Democrats represent such a vast array of interests.
Okay.
Instead of like different minorities, different, LGBTQ, gender stuff, like all of that, and so there's a huge umbrella, and there's a lot of, and, environment, all these issues, labor, that go under like Democrats. And so they're sort of spread so thin that it's actually hard to like rally behind one agenda. Whereas I think the Republicans are doing that pretty well. And, which is no masks. Anyway, but that's a whole nother thing. But anyway, and so I think like in terms of like, racial equity and racial diversity, and ethnic diversity, you're totally right that like that it's very complicated because there's so many interest groups, know. But I think what's interesting is when we look at the history of white supremacy in the country, it's like there is stuff that it's like, not to get too like whatever into it, but it's like policies put white people at the top over and over and over again, and like made it easier for them to get good jobs, to own homes, to, go to the Ivy League, and then of course that just perpetuates more resources and more income, accumulation and more opportunity, like opportunity begets opportunity. And so then it's like, if that, all of that opportunity was being, like shoveled into like one specific group, and now we want to, take that power and the opportunity and like start to make it more equitable, it's going to feel like it's being taken away from someone.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good point. Because you know what I wonder all the time is, all right, maybe American Indians, get their first shot, but, I don't know, like the 12 of them that there are, I don't know, sadly. But it's like, all joking aside, but, so you have black people, right? That they're like, kind of like first in line, like, hey, there's a lot of wrongs that we need to do right over here, because, a lot of the stuff that happened is fairly recent.
Yeah, it is.
Forget about like the day-to-day stuff, but I'm talking about, like the segregation stuff, the really big institutional stuff. Yeah. It's not really that long ago.
No.
But then as you have other groups come in, right? How do you keep like, okay, like for instance, like this past month, how do you keep black people from having resent towards Asians for like, when there may be some perception that kind of like piggybacking off of what their movement is, and taking it away from.
I think that there is like there's just this myth that like we can't uplift everyone together. It's like we're only in it for like this specific demographic, whether that's like, a certain gender and a certain ethnicity and a certain geographical location. It's like, I really do truly believe that when we uplift like our brothers and sisters of whatever ethnicity or socioeconomic status, like it's better for everyone. And, I think that there have been things that have been very divisive that were outside of like movements of and my history isn't good enough to exactly recall all of this, but like, one thing that I think has been so important is like with understanding like what it is to be an ally to, black people, black folks, black friends, Black Lives Matter. And then also it opened up a conversation for like when the stuff in, the terrible shootings in Georgia happened for, me to say to my friends, like, I saw you doing all this great stuff to like say you're an ally, but like, I haven't felt that from you in this regard, or I have felt it from you because we've all grown in the last few months to realize that like we have power, like, because most of my friends are white, because I grew up around white people. So it's like, they're like, oh, it's my turn to do something now, like it's, in fact, it's necessary.
How much of it is helpful though?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, when you think about everything that has happened last year and all, the amount of protests and about the exposure on social media and all that stuff, I mean, what has passed?
I completely agree. I just finished reading How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi, and my friend and I have our little book club, and he just lays it out so well. It's like, until we all commit to creating anti-racist policy, like, there will be no difference. And one thing that he talked about, which really impacted me, was this idea of like, we've leaned in so long as a society in saying that like, racism is because of hatred and ignorance. And if we can breed kindness and compassion, we will, dissipate this hatred, and then racism will disappear. But really, racism is like, comes from self-interest. And then it's perpetuated by these racist policies that no one's doing anything to fight. And so it's like, really, we need to like get political. We need to get like logistically technical and stuff. And it's not sexy. And, it's like, what can you do? Like, where you work, can you institute like very specific hiring and training policies? Because the people, I don't know if you've seen it, but literally anywhere I've ever been, it's like, people want to hire someone who reminds them of themselves. If all the leadership are white people, they're going to hire someone who reminds them of themselves when they were younger, and they're most likely going to be white. And so it's like, and maybe they'll...
Wouldn't the same thing happen though? Like, if I'm Mexican and I'm going to hire just more Mexican people, and then we have another problem. It's like,
and see, I think, and I think that we have to, as we move sort of on this spectrum of like getting to like an anti-racist society, we have to get to the point where like, maybe that's our next problem, is now everyone in leadership programs are like, Latinx. Yeah. And it's like, oh, now like all the Fortune 500 companies are being run by Latinx men. Like, oh, that's a problem. But like, let's get to that problem first before we start being like, oh no, everyone has to have their equal share,
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, when I read things like the story of Babel in the Bible, right? Where basically you had all these tribes where they decided that they are going to get to God, right?
I don't know the Bible very well, so please ask.
Right. So the story goes is that they want to reach God, right? But instead of going by, the word of God and doing all the things you want to do, it's like, hey, why don't we just build a tower all the way to God, right? And so they get all these tribes. They're like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And so they all start building this tower, because they're all unified in this thing. God gets a hold of this plan. It's like, what are they doing? Oh, the hell they are, right? And so he smites them, right? But what he does is he makes sure that they all look different and speak different languages.
So they can't build it together.
So they can't build it together anymore.
Clever of God.
But when you hear stories like that written a long time ago, it makes me feel like this has been a problem forever.
Yeah.
Right?
There's always going to be difference.
Yeah. And so that's what I say, like, this is a complicated issue because of this social experiment that we're in, where, in most other places, people look like each other, eat the same things, have the same customs, right? And so it's just a harder, situation for us to try to do it. But I think we can.
Yeah.
I really do think we can, but at least for me, I definitely appreciate the conversations that we're having based on race, because I think they are important. I think for the longest of time, we just kind of turned our way from them, didn't want to confront them because it is ugly, right?
Yeah.
And it's an ugly part of its history. And even though the American flag hasn't been upheld to what it represents, I think together we can. But I think we have to be careful about the way we go about doing it.
Yeah.
Because at least in my opinion, it kind of feels like there's more division than unity.
Yes.
And I'm not sure if that's just part of that process that's happening, where we kind of have to shake all that off and oh, this sucks. Why do they get this? And what about us? And wait, we don't mean to be this, like all the complications that come from these conversations. And I'm not sure if once we get past that, then does it become okay? Because as much as the news would like me to believe that this is a dark, dark racist world, I know it exists, but maybe I'm a little bit more optimistic than that, because at least within my world, you know, which is the most important to me, everybody's cool, you know, and everybody's kind of like on the same wavelength. You know, we all just kind of wish everything was like okay. We wish we didn't have to have, you know, these conversations like, why can't, you know, we just treat other people as other people?
Yeah. You know, yeah.
I just don't know how to solve it.
Yes.
You know, but here's the thing, but I don't think I think it's a complicated problem, but I also think it's an easy problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Okay. Why do you say that?
Because it's as easy as don't be a dick, you know? It really is treat everyone the same as you'd like to be treated. It's what it is, right? It's just nobody's better than you because of anything like that. Especially on, you know, color of your skin and any of that stuff. And I really do feel if you got, probably not the whole country, but you got about 20 people in a room, in a conference room, and then you held a gun to their head and said, hey, you got a week to come up with a plan to fix this thing, I guarantee you would be fixed.
Yeah. Well, and so then that's the question is, right? Like, why do we need that impetus, the gun to our head, to fix the problem? Why can't we just fix it right now?
You know what? I think because of interest.
Self-interest.
Because people are like, well, sure, but I kind of want it to benefit. I want to make sure that I get my, you know, my part of this in this whole thing. You know, I want to put my little thing on this to make sure that my people, you know, get this. And well, I need this too. And then all of a sudden it's just a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But when you take that away, that you know, take away the special interest, I think, you know what I think? I think if aliens came down, I think that maybe.
You know, it's interesting though, because I think the COVID was such a good example of something the entire planet is facing together. And I'm not sure we met the challenge as a globe.
I don't think so either.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in a multiverse, we would know this, but it would have been really interesting if Trump wasn't in office, if it was somebody else, how the whole thing would have come out, you know, because, you know, everything just became really political really quick.
Yes.
You know, and then the fact that it involved China, the fact that it involved China and then there was President Trump as well, like that just is a clusterfuck.
Completely. And, you know, I think, you know, to go back to sort of this idea of like of self-interest and tribalism, I think you're right. Like politically, like this tribalism was stoked. But if we... So I also like to sort of draw back. It's interesting to see like where we identify as individuals of like the groups that we belong to, right? Because you're like, even with that example where your first instinct wasn't to say I'm in the American category. Yeah. Whereas like mine is like, I feel like I have to say like I'm Nepali American for other people's benefit. Because if I just say I'm American, they get confused. and like my whole thing too is like you know, when we talk about like helping our communities and like even grants will be like, we're only helping people in this vicinity. You know, to me, it's like my community extends to Nepal, to my kids there, because I've chosen that as my community. I've chosen that as my family. And like, I do think like chosen family is just as important as biological family, also because I'm adopted probably. And, and so
you're
exactly.
like, real family's kind of lame.
Yeah, exactly. Don't tell them that. So anyway, yeah. And it's just like, it is funny to see, you know, where we draw those lines. And if we were all in a room, like who would we go to bat for? Right. And how do we, and it's all because like we have this idea that there's like this scarce resource. There are scarce resources and there can't ever be enough for everyone. So we have to like put ourselves forward or the people we represent forward. And like, yeah, how do we get to a point where like we don't see that? And I don't know. Yeah. Yeah.
So question for you. And, so, you know, what's really back to like what I was saying is that, the fact that everything is, you know, when it comes from like the news organizations and stuff like that, at least like in the way that I think, I'm like, oh, well, they have something to sell you.
Yeah.
Right. And if violence against Asians is hot right now, what they're going to do is they're going to go across the fucking country and see instances of that so that they can give that to you. Right. And so part of it would be like, look, we're exposing this thing that's happening. And so, Asian people are like, hey, look, this is happening across the country. And like, you know, it's kind of our time that we stop putting our heads down and we bring up these things that happen. Right. And, I think like last summer, there was this, interest in like vendors and like, Hispanic vendors and whatnot, being robbed. Right. Cause they all carry cash.
Yeah.
Right. So,
I didn't hear about that.
Yeah. So, it's like, it's not common.
Yeah.
It happens, but it's not common. Right. But you hate to see that. And then, so as a human being, right, let's say you saw this white person go up to this Hispanic vendor, right, and punch him and then steal his money, right? Why is it that as humans, we're probably going to focus more on the fact that that person was white and punch that person, right? And then at that point, what goes on in your brain that you're like, white people going around punching around street vendors? How, because I feel like a lot of the problem stems from this, you know? How do you keep your mind from going there? You know, where, like I remember, in school, one of my friend's dad was, he was a bus driver, right? And happy as can be, happiest man as can be. And then they changed his route, right? And it was through like Compton Watts area, right? I mean, it took about 6 months. He got racist real quick.
Oh, wow.
You know, because of like, he's dealing with all these kids. And then, you know, it's like, there's fights breaking out all the time. Mind you, before his little area that he had, he was just like, la, 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 the bus man. And all of a sudden he's dealing with certain kids of certain color throwing shit at him and all that stuff. Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, you could just say like, well, it's just because like it has nothing to do with their skin color and stuff like that.
Right.
But as a human, that's kind of where he went.
Yeah,
you know?
I see.
And so why do you think that happens? And then how do you prevent that?
Yeah, that's so basically generalizing based on race,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Well, you know, I think that so I'm gonna just like probably butcher Kendi's idea, but like this, how to be an anti-racist, one of his main things is like you treat everyone as if they're an individual and not a spokesperson for their race or ethnicity or gender or whatever. And that's really hard to do because I literally think biologically it's been shown that like as humans we have to categorize, right? And so it actually takes more.
So one more time, what is it? Treat
Individuals as if, treat people as if they're individuals and not a representation of a greater category, basically.
Yeah.
And I remember this possibly from Abnormal Psych, where like we humans have to categorize, so we have to like make a if something happens to us, we like automatically categorize it, and we can only change that categorization by going back and consciously like recalling it and then changing it. And so then it's like, unconscious bias goes to conscious bias goes to, I think, conscious unbiased goes to unconscious unbiased or whatever. And so it's like, yeah, you have to basically every time that happens be like, it's not all X colored kids. It's, this one individual doing this thing. And then also to recognize how policy has created the scenario for like kids or like in his case, to like be in the position where they are and, and express themselves the way they're expressing themselves. And, and I think like, and I do it even myself, like even, and this is what's so, insipid about like the model minority myth. It's like, why is it bad to be like, here's a good stereotype about you? It's still bad because it's a stereotype.
Yeah.
And so, and it is like, I think we just have to, at least what I'm trying to do in my daily life is be like,
think about being that Asian kid that's like, yeah, good at math. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because two of my cousins are Asian American, different, Asian descent than me, but like they're both not into math. And it's so funny because they're like, we don't like math. Yeah. And it's like, okay, you know, and I think for them, it's like hard because people assume that about them, you know, especially in school and stuff. Now it's different. But,
yeah. A lot of it seems like it's hardwiring in us that we have to rewire.
Yeah. And it is, I mean, I think tribalism is in a way survivalism. Like we've learned to do that. And so we just have to like teach ourselves to unlearn it consciously. Can I go back to the Yale thing really fast just because I have my soapbox? I know we're like, this is probably going on forever. But just because I think admissions is one of those things too, where it feels like it's a very small resource. And so it's very precious because it's so in demand. And so there's so much like scrutiny of like how it's divvied up and everything. And I think that like no matter what the admissions process ends up being, the point of like diversifying it beyond what it has been is important because like it has been, you know, primarily like white men. It's still a white boys club. Like the professoriate is still primarily white men. Like, you know, and until the student body is reflected in the professoriate, like we still have a long way to go. And like one thing that I was a huge proponent of when I was a student at Yale was we had freshman counselors when you come in, and then you had ethnic counselors, but white people didn't get ethnic counselors. Only non-white ethnic people got counselors, ethnic counselors, which was weird to me because I grew up in a white community. I thought I was white until I was like 15. So I was like, why do I need an ethnic counselor? But also that's cool because like I've never been around this many Asians. Let's like learn about stuff, you know, even though there were like 2 Nepalis, but, and
that seems like a lot.
Yeah, actually they weren't in my class. They were like younger than me. And they weren't Nepali American. I think they may be citizens now, but they had grown up in Nepal. So we were still quite different. And they were men, not women. But yeah. And it's so interesting. And I remember being asked to like, I applied to be a freshman counselor. I didn't get it. And then they were like, yeah, but like sort of as a condolence, like you could be ethnic counselor. And I was like, no, like, I don't think that, like, I think white people need to have an ethnic counselor too. Like, it doesn't make sense that like we're sort of ghettoized in this way. And now it's coming out more and more that it's like the people who are in the power positions who are primarily white people are the ones who need the most education about like what they can do and what they need to do to implement change and equity and equality. And so it's just, and even in that last like over a decade, you know, that movement I think has grown, and that would make a lot more sense to like leadership at Yale now than it probably would have if had I tried to, you know, do something about it.
If you got cursed with living forever till the end of time, when do you think you'd be like, I think we solved this? At what point?
I think I'm a pessimist. I don't think we'll ever solve it.
Yeah.
Because I think you're right. There's always going to be difference.
You know what? It is pessimistic because you wish you could solve it. But when I see countries like China, right, that have been around for thousands of years, and they still haven't fixed it, it leads me to believe that it might not be a thing that we fix. We just minimize as much as possible, right? But but I think where we can do is like how you said, like, hey, there are a lot of laws that we know damn well were written with race in mind. Let's start with getting rid of those, right? Let's start getting rid of the obvious things. And I think too, you know, because when I was just thinking about this the other day, where you hear people like, man, or like older people like, oh, the good old days, right? And then right away now somebody goes like, yeah, but did you know what minorities was? I'm like, stop. Like I don't know what it'd be like to be white in the 50s, but it sounds like it was awesome, right? It sounds like it was awesome. And I I doubt most of it was amazing because of race, right?
Yeah.
I think that most people, especially kind of like post-war America, happy that loved ones are back. Economy is doing great. Television and all that. It was kind of a crazy time to be alive at that time. And, you know, when you talk about like family and things like that, I feel that's kind of like more what they're talking about, and the ability to go to college and to provide for other people, right? And a lot of people missed out on that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And what I would want is the opportunity for that.
Yes.
You know, that's all.
Yeah.
That's all. I want a piece of that too.
Yeah.
Right? And if we can just get rid of the things that keep me from that, me personally, I don't need any extra help. I would just like for it to be as fair of a playing field as possible. And then let me do the rest. But until we get rid of those things, things like getting rid of Speedy Gonzalez mean very little to me.
Yeah.
You know, when there's still legislation out there,
Yeah.
outdated legislation out there.
Yeah.
Credit scores, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. See, that's a really good example of something that's specifically designed to like help certain people and hurt certain people. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I started thinking about, you know, I've gone through credit report reform.
Yeah.
You
Those
know,
are
where it's like,
fun.
you know, going from like 400 to like, you know, now acceptable score in
Yeah.
society. But, you know, I think about just like when I was saying, like we're moving, right? Like how it totally depends where you live.
Oh yeah.
You know, where, you know, a good credits where I can live in Newport Beach, I can live in Santa Monica, you know, where I can live wherever actually, you know, with a great credit score.
Yeah.
With a not so great credit score or a bad credit score, I'm limited to where I can move. And that is probably going to be somewhere with a lot of violence, a lot of crime, probably not the best schools. And if they're not the best schools, then I probably won't get the right resources. And exposure, right? Which is huge. Like I have a lot of friends in education, and one works in kind of like an inner city school. The other one works in like Orange County area.
So like night and day.
It's like night and day with, you know, I'm sure, you know, there's really great teachers that love the students and want the best for them and try as they may. But they're still buying all the supplies themselves and stuff like that. While over here you have parents that are donate the stuff to the teachers and like, what does the school need? Oh, I got it. Right.
Yeah.
When it comes to like STEM programs, you know, these people will get like some Android tablet of some sort. Over here, they'll get a laptop, they'll get tablets, they'll, you know, definitely more resources. So those two kids are going to grow up exposed to two different things, you know.
Completely.
This person probably lived in an apartment with other family as well. This person lives in a house with, you know,
Backyard. And
like the first time I moved to a house was like 6 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, oh my God, this is cool. Cause I grew up in apartments my whole life. But stuff like that,
Completely.
that exposure will change your trajectory in life. And how we talked about before, right? If this person, you know, they're, you know, more successful, they'll be exposed to more things like, I can work at NVIDIA video game card printing and stuff like that.
Exactly.
And this person says like, oh man, like I want to be like my dad. I want to be a mechanic.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that, but there's two different things that they're exposed to. And I'm hoping that as we break those systems, this person's like, you know, I might follow what my dad does because I love what he does. I love helping around and I can make a great living out of this.
Yeah.
But I also know that if I want to become a visual effects artist, I can do that as well. And there's nothing stopping me from doing that.
Yeah,
right?
completely. And I think you're right. Like, I think even if we don't fix it, we're going to get better. And you're right. Like, I do see that happening.
I thought we were getting better.
Yeah.
I really thought we were getting better.
And then,
Well, no, I don't know about and then. Like, I'm telling you, look, I'm not a conspiracy person guy per se, but it's just like, I see how much the news intervenes. Like, cause I try to watch all kinds of news and then make my own opinion off of that. And I look at all the news, I'm like, y'all are all crazy. And it's like, it's so the same story and being told 4 different ways.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to kind of show myself out and kind of research it myself. Cause you know, I'm thinking about, growing up in the 90s, right? And the way that I judge it is kind of by how society is like the art, the music, TV, right?
Yeah.
That, for me, that's a pretty good description of where we are as a American
metric.
culture, as a metric, right?
Yeah.
Or a metric for where we're at. And I feel that television movies were never as diverse as in the 90s. I mean, you think about when you talk about like African Americans, right, and the way that they're portrayed in movies and TVs and stuff like that. I can't imagine being black and only seeing like the roles are just like slaves.
Yeah.
So where I'm in, some terrible fucking shit.
Yeah.
Or being some sort of like servant and stuff like that, or like inner city kid and like making it, through the ghetto. And that's all you see.
Yeah.
Right. Who knows what that does for little kids watching that all the time, seeing like that's kind of like where you're at in life.
Yeah.
Well, then you saw the 90s, and then you had like Martin, right?
Yeah.
Who's successful DJ, and his wife Gina worked she was successful in her corporation, and so was Tommy. Nobody knew what Cole did. Oh wait, did nobody know what? Oh, it was Tommy. Anyway, living single, right? 4 black women, independent. One's a lawyer, one's owns a label.
Yeah.
So many shows like that. Where it really felt like we're doing good. We're on the right track. And then when Obama was became president, right? It felt like, man, everybody's like, high five, everybody. It's been a rough ride. It's been a rough ride, but we're getting there. We're getting there, you know? And the goal is, as amazing as it was to see the first black president, the goal would be that's not a surprise anymore.
Yeah. Yes.
And the same thing goes for, for every race, gender, where it's just, we have somebody that's representative of us, America. And the reason I wish that we can get it under wraps is because of a unique experiment that it is, it really is our advantage over everybody else as a country.
Yeah.
It really is.
I think that's a really good point, that it's like, it's our strength, not our weakness. We just need to invest in it. Yeah.
It's one thing that I think about sometimes when it's like, man, this must be weird. And how it's just kind of, how programmed we are, right? Just like when you watch any movie, right? Just like Netflix or anything like that, right? I just watching it. It's fucking great.
Yeah.
Right. And every once in a while I step back. I'm like, it'd be really weird for white people if everybody on this was like of a different race, but like the different race that they put into their shows was like, like that was them.
Yeah.
The walking role with like the Asian person on the computer, like, that's like in the back. That was like the only white person that you see, then maybe it'd be it'd get the perspective of like, oh, that is pretty weird when you think about it, that like we live in a country with all these different cultures, but they never see each other. That is pretty odd. That is pretty odd.
I feel like I completely agree that like TV and film is such a good metric for like where we're at. And I also think it's like usually behind where we feel like where the edges of society feel like they are. So it's a pretty good metric of in general, like where we are. And I always think about Friends, and if Friends was like remade, like it would have to be remade with like all people of different ethnicities. I mean, I would hope, right?
But here's the other thing though, right?
Would it be as popular?
No, not even that. You say that to me, and I'm thinking to myself, then maybe it wouldn't be that realistic. Because when you think about it, the way people usually work, all those people in Friends, that's pretty on the dot of like how I think that relationship is between them.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
And it was just kind of weird because like I remember going to parties and events with coworkers when I was living out in West LA, and I don't run on race all the time, right? It's not like in the back of my mind all the time. But every once in a while, I'm like, Oh, how weird. I'm the only non-white person here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's kind of weird, right? And as much as we say allies and all this and all that, we want to learn, you still see on Instagram, like, going out to eat with friends and like, oh, okay, they all look like you.
Yeah. Oh, no, yeah. I used to work in restaurants and it was hilarious when people would come in and check in and they'd be like, oh, like I'm waiting for my group. And I'm like, you look exactly like the two people over there waiting for someone. Your friends are already here. It's like great. Like you're even dressed similarly. Yeah. Like, yeah, it is. It's true.
And so I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. Like you said, people like who, people that look like them.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just as long as that doesn't interfere with like somebody advancing in life, right?
Yeah. Or sorry, interfere with someone what?
The way you advance in life.
Yes, advance. Yeah.
I'm not getting a promotion because we both have the same skills, but I don't look like you. That person does. You give it to them.
Yeah, exactly.
As long as it doesn't do that.
Yeah. Well, and and I think you're right. It does come back to this exposure too. Like if you grow up with people around you who look different, like you're just going to be more comfortable with people looking different around you too.
But what I like is this, right? So I don't know the percentage of people in my job, but it definitely seems like it's white and Asian, right?
Yeah.
But even with the whole like, well, they people like to hang out with people they look like, that exposure, I feel is super important, where now you have these people that would have just hung out with themselves, but now they're exposed to Korean barbecue, right? And so they're like, let's go give this a shot, and our Korean coworker said, go here and order these things. And they eat the food, right?
Yeah.
And that's usually everybody's gateway. It's a dang food, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, Korean barbecue is amazing. Oh my God, we have the scallion cake and all this, and like you make it yourself, and it becomes like a cool thing. And now those people are exposed to this extra thing, right? And so, it brings that moment of accepting other cultures even closer, And I think if we could try to venture out more and hang out with other people, where now all of a sudden you realize that, oh, people aren't that different. Some people just use different spices in their food, you know? And to see that we're actually more alike than different, then I think that's how we get this to a better place.
Yeah. Oh, completely. And you're right. I think food is such a good gateway into like shared culture. And, I grew up in a town that just happened to have like a small like Thai population and had amazing Thai food. And so like I got Thai food like every week growing up. And then when I went to college, like Noah had never had Thai food until he went to college. And I'm like, that's crazy. That was like a staple, and and it's just, again, it's like where you grow up, what you're exposed to. And if you can consciously just like make the time or make the choice to like engage beyond what you're immediately comfortable with. Yeah. Or no. There we go. We did solve it.
See, I'm telling you, just give everybody different food.
Yes,
that's really how it starts.
It's so true.
But yeah, let's wrap it up on that good note.
Yes.
But I appreciate you coming by.
Yeah.
And like I said, I admire you so much because you're a person that decided to not just donate money. You just had to get your hands dirty, and do something about it directly, which is awesome. And you're a good human being doing good things for other human beings. And in the end, like that's the best that we can do, right? To make this place a better place to live.
Totally. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
this was
Caste.
fun.
This was so much fun.
Yes.
I will say money is very helpful too, though. But this was so much fun. Thank you so much. I really had.